I'm here with one of our industry's leading house of worship designers, Stephen Ellison. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing great here. How you doing, Jim?
Doing pretty good. Tell me a little bit about the way that you've come into this industry as a house of worship designer.
Well, I got my degree in lighting in the theatrical industry and have been in the theatrical industry many years. When I got into the church more because I got saved and got back into the church, mainly I was working in the audio. Started working for a company and we were doing installation work, designs and like that, and found out about the church market, and it is just the same as doing a theater. So brought my background to it. It was easy to do.
So do you find that as house of worship technology and pretty much lighting technology in general progresses, have you noticed any trends with, say, like LED ellipsoidals or LED wash fixtures that you feel note?
I remember when LEDs, we would go to the trade shows and they were barely there. Now the LED has reached its own in the market. As a designer of systems, we're not putting in dimmers, we're going hybrid. So all the hybrid systems put in relays, we put in lots of DMX, and if I need a dimmer, I put that as a single dimmer with the fixture. The LED then is natural for it. So most of the hybrid system is that I've got to get good white light for the front and basic white light, but I want a lot of color from the back and the sides. So we're going with multicolor LEDs for the back and side light. And the last church I did, I actually had the money available to do the front light as LEDs as well. That's where I used your Ovation 190. And that was just as good as using the ellipsoidals I'm standardly using in every other design.
Stephen, let's talk about color when we're working in house of worship design. Do you see churches and most worship houses as accepting of using color? How do you feel about that?
A lot of churches are. Even the one church I did that used most of your fixtures, or used all your fixtures, yeah, they brought color in. We're not talking garish, we're talking subtle, nice, easy color that blends really well. The other part of it is, if you're doing video, especially if you've got people with dark skin complexion, a nice blue background makes them stand out. So they don't blend into the background. You've got to, work with that. The other fun thing that I haven't talked about is an area that a lot of people don't necessarily think about is the house lighting. Now LEDs are being used in house lights. So now we don't have to replace all the house lights, and you can put in color fixtures that can produce color. And so you talk about doing, well, that Christmas Eve midnight service, make the house go light blue. And it just blends the mood. And I've talked to a lot of churches about that, and they're like, ooh, yes, I want to do that. That would be really cool. So that's a great way to start out. And they're accepting it. Yeah, they're going to have the more traditional churches. It's fine. We go in and do them in white. Not a problem. But even then, I did a church, very traditional. Still, I put in 48 fixtures because they were doing HD. I covered everything, very even. They could walk anywhere, up all the way back and forth from the altar and over. Never got out of it, and they loved it. You know what I did? I actually did put in color. A very, very light tint of amber because it brought the wood out.
Well, keep along with that stream. So if you're talking about designing, we're talking about color. Tell me how, as designing in house of worship market that you do, tell me how you derive your creative inspiration. Like, where do you get your ideas from when you're designing?
It's basically, I go back to my theater roots and I look at it and start with all the basic positions. Got to get it in there. Have to have all the right stuff. And once I put everything in, then it's just a matter of working with the architecture of the space. It depends on how they build the building. Some are building it just like, raw ceiling, basic platform, what I would call stage. So that's just standard. That's just going back to they're really contemporary. You get into the more traditional, very much, then you're up in the arches and the beams, and then I'm going to try and hide things. So it's not so obvious. So the technology isn't so obvious, but I'm going to give them really good lighting. Because one thing I found, if I've got bad lighting and the guy's going in and out and in and out, it's harder on my eyes. So I want to provide eye comfort. I want them to not strain to look at it, because if they're straining to look at it, they're not paying attention. They're losing concentration because their eyes are constantly having to, so that's really one of the things I derive it from, is I want to just give good, solid lighting. I go back to the roots of where I got, my inspiration. I just wanted to do good lighting.
Stephen, tell me a little bit about how you feel with working with volunteers and how the technology of lighting constantly is progressing. Do any of those things create a challenge for you?
Very much so. And it depends on the level of that church. A church that is very traditional, very simple, I might put in something that appears complex, has a lot of lighting and things, and then I'll do a lot of background programming to make it simple for them to make use of it. So that they don't have to understand all the ins and outs, they never have to worry about the DMX, they don't have to worry about the programming, they just run the cues. So I'll give them a simple lighting console. As you get more and more into the more complex churches, the more contemporary churches, they've got, a lot of times the young teens and all get really into it. Some of the older guys have more trouble learning the console than the younger guys do. And they'll do incredible things. So it depends on the level of the service, going from contemporary to traditional. As you go from the traditional, we make it very much simple, use simple consoles, up to going to where we're using very complex consoles, the same console software that's used in concert arenas. So it just depends on, I have to gauge and have to meet and learn them, learn how they're working. The other thing is, we'll take churches that have almost nothing, and suddenly you give them a very complex system. And so at that point, what I start with is we train them on the console to a little bit. You try and do a 4-hour training class, and they're going to forget the last 3 hours of it. So we train them a little bit, they get a little comfortable, they can work with it to a degree. They're not using all of it. I had one church, we had moving lights in there. They didn't turn them on for the first 2 months, because they learned the console, they learned all the new fixtures. Then, and that was actually your moving lights. Then I went back and did another training. So you can repeat doing multiple trainings, and then they can begin to learn. So then you go, here's how to run a console. Okay, let's talk lighting concepts. How do you make looks? How do you use these different fixtures? So it might take 1, 2, 3, even 4 training sessions of a shorter duration, them getting more and more hands-on with the console. And so that gets them a better feel, more comfortable, and they're not making them, they're not looking bad on Sunday morning.
So what do you think in terms of the future? What do you see, and now LEDs are coming into their own, solid, and we're feeling good about them. What do you see influencing the house of worship market next? With maybe respect for the lighting technology.
Yeah, oh yeah, I think we're going HD, the camera systems are going in. We've gone away from where you recorded on cassette. You've gone away from even DVDs mostly. We're getting it out there with streaming, so it's just more and more they're going to understand we've got to have good lighting. If you don't have good lighting, you're not going to get good camera images, and you're reaching a lot more people with that. Streaming, they can pick it up, they don't have to get out of bed, they can watch church in bed. Or the shut-ins can get it much more readily. So we're getting the word out a lot better, so the lighting is just going to have to match that, and just basic good lighting. There's nothing special about it, it's just got to be done right. When I walk into most churches that have been lit in the last 10, 15 years, all I found is a front light bar. Like, well, where's the back light, where's the side light, why didn't you put this in right, It's not that hard. The basic lighting positions haven't changed in, I don't know, since they used candles. Just, the physics of it hasn't changed, so it's not really that we're changing anything as much as the LED source is now just going to get better and better, less expensive and less expensive. We're not going to be changing lamps anymore. We're going to have a lot more accessibility to it, and you're just going to have to accept the multi-attribute fixtures are here now. You're not dealing with just a dimmer. One universe of DMX is going away real quick. You know, I did a youth room. It was almost a whole universe. 11-foot ceilings, you know, not that many fixtures, and I blew out a universe real quick. So just learn DMX, and multi-universe, you know, installations are coming.
Thank you, Stephen, very much. Stephen Ellison, everyone.